I'm glad that you joined this session on Flutter. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how Flutter came to be and how Dart was chosen as a language for Flutter. Now, I don't know how many of you attended the previous session. It might be a little bit of repeat to the ones who have attended the previous session, but I'll make it brief. Now, Flutter was introduced by a team in the Google office when they were experimenting with trying to create a faster Chrome, believe it or not. So what they did was they took Chrome and they were experimenting on how to make it faster. So when they're trying to make it faster, they realized that like a lot of the reasons why the slowness came was due to the fact of various compatibility for HTML, which they had to create with right from 94, right? Like it was right from the first the web browser was released. There were a lot of quirks which were introduced in the browser world, which had to be implemented to maintain the consistency of web across the world. Now they just said, what if we just support only the modern syntax or the modern things and see how small and how efficient it can become. And they removed all the things which were not required to what you can say, which can be used, which can be simulated without using the old syntax, and just by using the new syntax you can create complex UI. So they removed all the old syntax, and they were surprised to see that the speed was almost like 10 times faster than the current Chrome. But obviously they can't go ahead and break the web by removing the support for everything. And they tried to experiment further, saying that, okay, can it compete with native performance? So that is how the team, the people who wrote Node.js and people who wrote Chrome created this version of Flutter, which was purely done as a cross-platform system, which can be really fast for rendering UI and animations. They had three goals, right? When they tried to create it. First thing was they said like you should be able to create beautiful animations, right? They started with beautiful applications. You should be able to create beautiful applications. Secondly, you should be able to have really smooth animations, and you should have great performance. These are the three goals which they set themselves for, right? They didn't set up a goal saying that it has to be cross-platform. They just set up a goal saying that, okay, if you have to write a UI, these are the three things. Now, while doing that, since they used the Chrome platform and they used, which was inherently cross-platform, and they used the 2D library, which Chrome uses called Skia. They got cross-platform as almost like they were not trying for it, but they were able to achieve it. Now, what makes Flutter really fast, right? Were three things. First thing is Flutter compiles the code which you write to the native CPU by what you say instructions. It is not interpreted like JavaScript or Java. It is directly compiled directly to your native code. So that is one reason why it gives great performance. Secondly, all the rendering it uses GPU. So the rendering is not CPU based. Yes, it can fall back to CPU if you don't have appropriate GPU, but by default it uses GPU. So that gives it a great performance in terms of graphics and animations. Third thing is they made sure that right from the start that you can access all platform APIs. So it is not a restrictant to use Flutter because a lot of times earlier the lessons learned while writing cross-platform applications is people don't use them because they are not able to extend it to access devices or the device services. Now they addressed all these three things. And when they released it, they asked the users after trying for a couple of years, what did they like about Flutter? And the reasons what they got was, they said that there are 5 reasons why people like Flutter. First thing is everyone liked their fast development. What do I mean by fast development? If you have used Flutter, the iteration time, right? Like after the first time you try to run it, the every iteration which you make is really fast. And the reason why they were able to do that is because of the way they designed the Dart language. Now, here's where it comes to why Dart. I will just go into a little bit of thing. They made sure that one of the most frustrating thing is, like, for example, if you just change the color, or if you just change the size of one of your UI element, or if you just change the layout, in traditional programming environment, you have to recompile, you have to reinstall, redeploy, and then and see the output. And secondly, it becomes even more complex if your application has like lots of screens. You also need to click various buttons to reach to the screen which you were experimenting with, and the state has to be maintained. If the state, what I mean by that is, like, you have to exactly click the same button, same text which you have to enter in all the input boxes, which resulted in you reaching to the current screen which you are currently debugging. Now in Flutter, they have this hot reload feature, which is like really amazing, right? Like it's almost instantaneous. You will see in the rest of the presentations, which the other panelists are going to show you. You can see that it's almost instantaneous, and you can simultaneously debug in multiple simulators and real devices, which you will be amazed at. Like, it is almost a sub-second speed at which the Flutter is able to push the changed code and maintain the state of the running application. Second thing is, right off the bat, they released with like a huge set of widgets, right? I have been programming in UI for almost 30 years right now. And one of the biggest limitations whenever a new framework comes about is it takes about what you can say 4 or 5 years before you have this set of widgets which are required to create a production app. Like, for example, like if it's a date picker or a calendar or like a grid or like a virtual grid or a tab bar or whatever you name it. Flutter, you will be amazed of how many platform specific and platform independent widgets come right out of the box. There's almost no UI which you see currently which cannot be simulated using the widgets which come out of the box. You don't need a separate third-party library for what is a third-party library for UI widgets, etc. The other thing which they made sure they did it is also they gave you a very easy way to simulate platform differences, and they gave the foundation classes. For example, for Android and Apple, they have foundation classes like the Cupertino classes and the material classes, which are built into the framework. So you can create native look and feel apps which look exactly like the native platform in which you are running. And the third thing is the integration to development tools. See, one of the things which people are religious about is like for example, if they use IntelliJ, they like only IntelliJ. If they use VS Code, they like VS Code. So Flutter team made sure that it has first-class support to all the commonly or the majorly used development tools. So it becomes very natural, right? There is first-class debugging support. There's first-class debugging support for what you can say in VS Code, in IntelliJ, and you can actually debug, you can step through, you can compile. All the features which you expect from a development tool is there. The fourth thing is the ability to control every single pixel. See, one of the frustrations in web is it's very difficult to control the layout and the pixel, exactly what the pixel is doing. If you want to control every single pixel, you almost have to draw a canvas, and that's the only way to control. Flutter framework made sure that like either you can operate at a very high level or at a very low level at each widget to widget basis. And then the layout system incorporates all the lessons learned from our experiments with flex boxes, the layout mechanisms in different UI frameworks. So it is really sophisticated. And the third thing is, of course, the last thing is it is free and open source, right? You can't beat that. So these are the main reasons which is that. Second, I'm just going to briefly show you some of the some code for you to sort of look at how it looks like. Now, let us take a look at this. Are you able to see my screen? I hope you're able to see the screen. I can't hear the answer. But this is the code for a JavaScript. This is how you define a class, a constructor, a method, and some variables in JavaScript. Um, these are the ways you define variables. You instantiate a class, then you use the class. This is all. If you guys are from JavaScript or Java, I don't see what is the difference, right? This might as well be JavaScript or Java, right? Or C Sharp. All of them look the same. Okay. This is how you define the string. This is how you define constants. This is how you define lists. This is how you define a map or on an object in JavaScript. And this is how you sort of have an if condition. This is how you define a lambda function, right? Now, going to Dart, converting this code to Dart is as simple as changing the extension of the file, right? I have not changed anything in this file. I just changed the took the JavaScript file and changed the extension, and this is all valid Dart, right? The only what you can say warnings which you see are it just says that I have not used the variable. That is the warning it's giving, or like I have redefined it. That's fine. But you can see that like if you already familiar with JavaScript, you will not have much difficulty in switching over to Dart. Now, then you ask like, okay, why Dart? Like, why, if it is similar to JavaScript, why did they have to create a Dart? Now, this is where it starts. They made it easy for you if you're coming from Java or JavaScript to easily get started in the language. Then they introduced a whole set of features which makes UI development a lot easier. I can't go into all the details out here, but I will point you out to this screen. I hope you're able to see this screen. If not, someone ping me in the chat saying that you're not able to see it. Yeah. So there is, you can go to this site, which is just type effective Dart or tour of a Dart language in, sorry, there are some comments. Let me see if there's any. Okay, I'll just increase the font size. I hope this is better. Okay. So initially I was trying to sort of say like, okay, let me create a presentation on the Dart language, but I realized that there's already a beautiful resource which is put by the Dart team, which is called the Tour of Dart language. You can just type the Tour of Dart language in your Google and you will find this page, or I'll paste the link in the channel right now. But it has all the basic concepts which takes you step by step, and you will realize that within 20 minutes you are able to really get started on Dart. It is not that difficult at all. Now, what I wanted to sort of talk about was some of the other functionalities which makes Dart really useful. First thing is they have things. What they call, they made the list really powerful. So, they have something called this type of list. Like if you see the syntax, you will realize that in a lot of languages you create a list and then you have an if condition to add things into the list or remove things from the list. Now they have created this inline syntax, like so you can directly define if and for and while inside the list while you're creating the list or map, and you can insert the things directly into that. Which is JavaScript already has the spread operator, but this makes it even more powerful, saying that include this list if the list is an of type integer, right? Like that is what this basically says. So read more about this the feature called collection if. Like for example, this navigation list has home, furniture, plants, and if promotion is active, you also include outlook. This example where it says that okay, the list of strings is has 0, And if what you can say, iterate to this other list and include this, like you can see how powerful it is. Very soon, as you start programming, you will realize that your code is a lot more compact when dealing with lists and maps. So this is just one feature. Of course, like this feature is, you can say that, okay, I can write it without using this feature. Yes, you can very well write it, but these are just things which will improve the speed. The things which the other thing which is good in Dart is they made it both like they made it type safe, but also you can write quick code without using types. So if you don't use types, it automatically infers them as like TypeScript does. Like TypeScript does assigns any variable to your if it doesn't know the type. In Dart, it basically defaults to something called dynamic, which is similar to any, right? Like it means that that variable can be of any type. So you can switch between both the modes, and you can also tell the linter to say that, okay, use only strict mode, so all the types are enforced. They started with like the history is very interesting. They started with like non-type safe, and now they became type safe. As I'm programming, I feel that the type safe mode really increases the speed at which you write code, right? The code completion is better, and it just makes your rapid development faster. And as I said, the goal of Flutter was to make rapid development, so types definitely help in that. Second thing is maps. Maps look like your regular JSON objects. They are like a key value pair. So this, if you see the syntax, they made sure that it looks very similar to your JSON object. So it should be very easy for you to use it out of the box. Second thing is all the Dart code is templatized, right? If you have worked with templates in C# or in Java, you will be very familiar with it, right? Let me see an example of the types. Yeah. So this is how you sort of define. It's basically saying that it's the elements is going to be a map of strings, right? That's what it is defining, or it can be an int, or so this is the template. If you know the template syntax in C# or Java, this is how it looks. So this is a very brief introduction. I don't have the time to sort of go to every Dart feature out here, but one thing you'll realize is it is already it is an easy language to learn if you know JavaScript or Java. I'll stop there and take any questions before I go further. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands, and I think the host can enable you. Okay, one of the questions are in what you can say, collection in Dart or a value type or a reference type. That's a good question. Right now, the way it sort of works is it is a reference type. You can pass a list to a function, and if you add it and you add it to the list, and it sort of you can see the new value. And it depends upon the scope of the list, right? Like how you sort of pass the variables. Second thing is with async why would we choose over React Native? Again, it's a good question. So React Native, the original purpose of React Native was they wanted people who are familiar with React to use the same concepts to develop native applications. So they made sure that you can define a mobile Android or a iOS application using the JSX syntax and program in JavaScript. That was the two, that was the main purpose of React Native. But React Native suffers from two things. First thing is performance, because it has to interpret JavaScript and then convert the JSX components into equivalent platform components. So so there is a performance step involved. And secondly, what happens was, because of this, they are restricted by what the platform has to offer. Whereas Flutter, what does is Flutter paints its own UI. So no matter in which platform they go, the UI looks very similar, right? Like if you paint a button, you're using the Flutter button component, or if you have sort of drawn the button, it looks exactly the same no matter in what platform you go. And the performance is a lot faster because the drawing code uses the native pixel drawing routines, not the UI of the native. So Flutter doesn't use the Android UI or the iOS components. Rather, it uses only the basic surface of what the platforms have to provide, and it draws every single pixel. So that is the reason why Flutter is a lot more consistent than React Native, and it is a lot more faster. So these are the two benefits you have on React Native. Secondly, React Native suffers from the same concepts and limitations of doing a layout in using the web-based layout mechanisms or the web-based what can you say, rendering mechanisms, because they are trying to make it as similar to web as possible. Whereas Flutter doesn't have those limitations. So it lets you create a lot more complex UIs and a lot more complex animations, which was not possible using the constraints of web.